All right, so we're gonna call this meeting pledge of allegiance. It's actually 7:04, right?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Mr. Gray,
I am present.
good. Mr. Corser? I'm here. Mr. Galloway,
I'm here.
and I'm here too. We're missing.
Mr. Simon emailed me today that he is feeling a bit under the weather and why not be able to
yeah.
join us. I've not heard from Amy today at all, though.
All right, so the next item on this list is agenda approval. So any comments on that?
Make a motion that we approve the agenda.
We have a second.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any nays? And then minutes, approval of minutes. I have the minutes in front of me, actually.
I read the minutes and have no issues with them.
Motion to approve.
If nobody else has an issue with it. Motion to approve,
I'll second.
seconded by
All,
Greg.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. And reports, Chairman. I don't have any, I'm just basically filling right now. And village manager.
Hey, good evening. Just a few quick items I want to highlight. First and foremost, on Saturday, September the 24th at 1 p.m. at his home at 1197 Queensway, there will be a celebration of life for former Planning Commission Chairman Dave McGrath, who passed away shortly after the last meeting after a short illness. Dave served the community for many years, Planning Commission, LIPOA board. He's someone that certainly gave his time and effort to this group, and he's someone that I will personally miss as a friend, I can tell you that. Moving on to other items of business. We completed the resurfacing aspect of the El Camino project last Thursday. At the end of this week, I believe we're scheduled to do the shoulder work, and then the following week we'll get some stripes down on it. Project has gone very smooth so far. There's a little bit of restoration work we need to do across the intersection from Coldwater Road. There was a truck that backed up into the yard there and tore up part of their yard. So we'll get that taken care of with the shoulder work at the end of the week. Trying to think anything else of major importance right now. That is about it, honestly. So.
Any question? And village council.
Yeah, okay, as Tim pointed out, the council recognized Dave McGrath for his service after made a point of to start the meeting. There was also a review and update of the LAPOA annual meeting. Everybody was brought up to speed on that. Proposed VSNA software change that was voted on, discussed, voted on and approved. VSNA software will be put in place. Coldwater Road drainage, we discussed that and approved that Row Engineering do a study on that and present us with their results. Tim talked about the street improvements, code enforcement update and actions being taken. Tim updated everyone on that. And approved and updated the council on the wall of honor process and program putting in place. It's been in place, I think, really.
Yeah, the wall-
Updating it.
Yeah, the Wall of Honor was a policy approved in 2012. Current individuals and groups recognized up there are Bill Dunham, Ken Torgerson, Dave's dad, and Dan Grisdale. And then we have the Clevey Committee, which was a kind of an offshoot of the LIPOA board that was the predecessor to the Charter Commission in terms of committee to incorporate the village, the first LIPOA board, and also the Charter Committee. If anybody has any individual that they think would be worthy to be up on the board, please let us know. We're going to talk more about it at the council meeting in September. And one other thing that I totally glossed over and forgot about, on our website, we had started putting information up about the bond proposal that we have on the November ballot. So there's a page right on one of the boxes on our front page of the website that's got a bunch of information on it so far that we will be updating. We will be having community meetings in September and 2 in October, 1 in September, 2 in October. For people to come and get questions, answers, that type of stuff.
They talked about that a lot in detail, the LIPOA annual meeting here this last.
Handout.
Pardon?
There was handouts. for
Yep,
people as well.
which I did bring up as well, make sure people know about the meetings, so I did point that out verbally, so hopefully we'll get.
We're working on a postcard to go out right now as well.
Good. Okay,
All right. So we don't have any public hearing. We take public comments.
comments,
So please stand up, state your name and address. No, nothing there.
You just speak up. I don't think they're listening.
I
don't think they.
think they're listening. Existing business, proposed comprehensive zoning code and map update draft 2.
Yeah,
And he's gonna.
I'm gonna stand up to listen. I got a frog in my throat. So in your package, you've got the changes made from post public hearing at last month's meeting. There was a cover sheet in the packet that highlighted all of those changes. I'm just gonna briefly go through them all tonight, and I have at least 5 areas in here tonight for discussion, feedback, kind of give me some direction on how you want to handle the issue. So starting off in chapter 1204, which are our definitions, we added a definition for apartment building. We had a definition for apartments in there, but not apartment building. And what we did with that is basically any triplex, quadplex, or more type building. So you've got a duplex, you've got a townhouse condo, in the apartment building to meet that classification. The definition of bed and breakfast was amended based on the feedback from the meeting last month to take out the events at the site, small events hosted at the site. The definition of footprint was amended based on the discussion to reflect the exterior walls of the structure, which correspondingly needed the definition of setback to be amended, because if you say the footprint's gotta be outside of it, but you allow an overhang that's got posts, so that should be outside the setback as well, is my view on it. We added a little bit of clarity to the fence section. There was kind of some vagueness as to how we would handle someone that's got a fence in a side yard that would front a street. And you'll see that a lot of times if it's a corner situation where the house isn't built on the corner, but the next lot over, so that side yard is going out towards the street. We said basically, you know, it can't be more than 4 feet, and it's gotta be at the setback line. Can't go near the street in the setback. Some of the comments last month really focused in on Fairway Drive area right here in terms of whether or not that area was appropriate for the neighborhood mixed use classification. And right now that area is currently zoned Lake Residential 3, which is the only area of the zoning code that allows attached residential in a residential district. So we went back to that standard. Obviously, we already kind of gave LR3 to somebody else in terms of the map that's proposed. So we came up with medium density residential. It's essentially what the LR3 district is right now, just named a little bit differently. And you've got some, I handed out tonight at the dais, some work that I want to do at the end of the presentation on the design requirements for attached dwellings. to make sure that we hit those correctly and how we handle those in terms of the design for that area in particular. And that is that area right there. So the last map you saw that was proposed for neighborhood mixed use. We changed it back to the current zoning, but gave it a new name because the LR3 was already taken. That would be the Chalet District conversion. So that would be that area that is not in neighborhood mixed use. It would be back to attached residential. And what we did, so there's the current LR3 uses on the left. There are the proposed for the medium density residential. A couple of questions I had on there that I would like feedback. They're in the blue. So as you can see, we kind of went side by side. There are a few that might be a little bit different that I wanted your feedback on. The assisted independent living facilities, that's a term that we took out of the ordinance. So that would be where the adult foster care home and group home come into play as opposed to that. And, you know, those, the foster care home is allowed by right by the state. Group homes. What we took out, obviously, in the ordinance, the nursing home, that's not a standard. So we matched up, as you might remember from March or April, you know, the uses in the ordinance matching up with what the state licensing term for them are. You know, looking at this, I think moving the golf course probably back to special land use from that draft would be appropriate. You know, and then the design requirement portion of it, we can get to that at the end, because that's the last part of my presentation. But, you know, when I went through this again today to look at all the changes that were in there, I really started to hone in on, you know, what would be the design characteristic if someone did want to do an attached residential dwelling, whether it's a townhouse, a duplex, triplex, whatever in that area. And the more I looked at it, the more I feel that we need to have some additional standards to address those concerns, to make sure that the quality is up to, you know, the level that we would hope for that area. For example, if they want to do a single family dwelling on a single family lot, the proposed design requirements are the same as the LR4 for that area. So it is a higher standard in my opinion. So it is something that I think that we should go through here at the end and look at a little bit more. Where that next? 1232, this is the residential section. So we updated all the charts and tables for the medium density residential. We did take the accessory dwelling units and bed and breakfasts, remove those completely from the LR4 district. I do have another question on ADUs for later in the presentation. And then we put the medium density residential in, that is the currently LR3. We made the standards for single family homes the same as LR4. 1234 is accessory structures to residential dwellings. We had a table that had some clarity on some setbacks between sheds in particular. How to deal with detached garages if someone built a single family home in that district. And then one of the things that came up in a discussion was, you know, if I'm going to remodel my garage, do I have to have all four sides come into compliance or just the sides that I'm remodeling? And I think the appropriate scenario would be just the sides that they're remodeling in terms of if they got to do a window or, you know, a door or something like that. Not make them, you know, redo the back of the building with windows if that's what the new ordinance would require. Outdoor display of merchandise. The ordinance really did not address this in any particular way. So we put in some criteria about, you know, you can't obstruct more than half the sidewalk or need at least 5 feet of sidewalk space to be clean, clear. We do have a business looking to locate in the community that is interested in that particular ability. We did the outdoor dining to update to also talk about you can't do it in a parking space without, you know, approval. So you can't use up your parking spaces for that without coming back in. We added additional setback for the bed and breakfast. The only district where B&B is proposed is the LR5 district. We also tweaked the parcel size for economy dwelling and setback based on the feedback we had last month and prior to the meeting. And then the previously mentioned condo area, Fairway Drive, moving it back to an LR3 type district. So the first question I throw out there is, you might remember the presentation last month where we had the different examples of what an accessory dwelling unit could be. And it's based on the definition, which is in black, which is the one currently in the draft. It says it's a secondary dwelling unit existing as either part of or the entirety of an accessory building subordinate to a single family dwelling on the same lot. Based on the feedback we had last month about, what happens if, after grandma moves out and you've got this dwelling unit, how do you keep that from being an apartment type deal? Well, you might remember the examples last month had a whole bunch of attached and only one that was a detached. So the thought that I was brought to you tonight to consider is flip it. An accessory dwelling unit can only be attached, so a secondary dwelling unit with a separate entrance, kitchen, sleeping area, full bathroom, attached to and part of a detached single-family dwelling for the independent use of an immediate family member residing in the primary dwelling unit of the structure. So right now, the box is what the definition allows. I would say flip it, have the box do what the definition doesn't allow. This, I think, addresses the concern of having, a rentable building out by itself on a property. Again, we took it out of LR4, it's only in LR5. But that would allow, like a bonus room on the side or a second story above the garage, basement. Those would be the allowed ADUs if we switch that definition. Which I think, if you're going to allow them, that would be the way to go, or take it out of the ordinance entirely.
So living space above a detached garage and not be allowed.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. It would have to be on that primary structure.
Right. Okay.
Yep. Has to be on the primary structure.
Makes sense.
One other, another thing that came up as we dealt with the footprint change. In the requirements for detached garages, the design requirements, it says that eaves and overhang are limited to 2 feet. How do we want to handle that if we change the definition? I think on the left, you've got a pretty clear, that's a lean-to on the side. The 2 feet would be from the edge of that post coming out. But on the right-hand side, they've cantilevered over, I think 8 feet actually.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, if you've seen that garage that's over on the Castle, or
That is the one on
that
Castle.
is the one that was built?
Yeah,
And that garage actually does it on both sides.
Yeah.
So as much as we wanted to, because of the footprint stuff and capabilities.
Yeah.
Once it was done, I'm sorry, it was quite ugly, in my opinion. Just because you got this and then you got these huge overhangs going over there, so. I almost at this point now would rather. He wanted to do a bigger anyway, correct? He wanted a
Correct.
bigger square footage of the garage itself, couldn't. So he maxed out the garage size and then just added on the cantilever stuff for the overall coverage, so.
So it's a 3-car garage.
It's got 2 big bays,
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, 2 of them.
2 big bays, and he's got a loft up above the back half of it.
I would rather gave him permission to enclose the whole thing than have that hanging.
Yeah,
That's, Lisa said, that's not right.
I mean, when there's nothing under it, to me, it just looks aesthetically ugly. You put a camper or whatever, something like that, under it, it's not so bad. But in hindsight now, I almost wish that he would have been allowed to have a bigger overall square
Whatever
footage and
you
not
put
have to
under
have the huge overhang, so.
Whatever you put under that is still out in view.
Yeah, so
Of the
exactly,
street.
so, yeah.
And the idea of the accessory building or the garage is to enclose your stuff.
Right, to hide all your place, so. yeah.
Right.
and then the last area which I've mentioned, design standards for attached dwelling units. Everyone on the table got a proposed set, and it's based very similarly on the single family design requirements. So the 3 types of attached dwelling units we allow in the ordinance, other than an ADU, obviously, are duplexes, apartment building, which is triplex, quadplex, condo, townhouse. So I put these in there for your consideration in terms of minimum parcel size for structure, minimum dwelling units per acre, or maximum. Maximum or minimum dwelling unit square footage, minimum bedroom size, attached garage requirement. Well, they have a front facing door, all those type of design requirements then. The next 3 pages are the, site development criteria, somewhere to come in and propose a building, the things they have to do with the site, not just the building. So. I am at your pleasure on how you want to proceed tonight, sir.
So, well, I know you gave me, some notes from Amy.
No, those are from me to Amy.
Oh, okay.
I started at least the 5 places where, I think there needs to be discussion and input tonight.
So. What is the proposal?
So if we,
This minimum dwelling units, that's
Just go ahead.
1,200 square feet, 800 square feet.
per unit, yeah.
I would like to see those lowered, the 1,200 ones, I'd like to see those lowered down to about 1,000 square feet.
Which building?
Well, the 1,200 square foot ones, have those come down to about 1,000.
Right, but you've got duplex apartment building and condo townhouse all have 1,200 minimum.
Well, we can have minimum, if you want bigger, you can go bigger, whatever the lot will allow. But I think we should, make lower the minimum a little bit. If myself, speaking for myself, my wife and I wanted to build a house like that, there's no way I need a 1,200 square foot home. And we've discussed this in the past, that our statistics show that we are getting older people here that want to retire and stay. And,
Our demographics are
but the,
going to younger people.
but the older people in the community want to stay here. They don't need that large of a home to live in. They don't need 2,000, 3,000 square foot home.
Yeah, but when you get down to, if we keep bumping that minimum down, and I'll say that I was against when we changed it years ago, we had reduced as well too, but think of my original home. When I first bought here was 24 by 28, which was 672 square feet, but times that by 2 floors, it was a 2-story house with 1,350 square feet. To me, that's a small, or what I would consider a typical house, because that was a 2-bedroom house with 1.5 full bathrooms on it. So to me, keep going down and down and down, to me, it sounds like we're gonna have smaller and smaller houses.
Well, again,
Which-
like you said, it's the minimum, they can go hard.
You can go.
Right,
larger,
but a lot of times. Yes, I agree, you can go larger, how small is too small though, I mean.
Well,
What's
that
the,
makes 4 kids in the 1,040
what's
square
the
foot.
square footage on a duplex,
I got 1,200 square feet and a 3-bedroom house.
so if you had to lose 200 square feet on that, would you be okay with that?
Why would I lose it?
Cause you're saying now, he was suggesting a minimum of 1,000 would be, somebody can build your house now.
But you
At
can
1,000
go bigger. I'm not.
You can
I'm
go
not
bigger,
Locked
but-
into 1,000.
I'm just looking at going too small on a minimum may end up meaning that we get a lot of houses around here that are too small. What's the square footage on a 2-wide mobile home? What are they, 20 wide?
It would vary,
What's a typical one? Would you do to have a typical size?
even like a modular, 24, 26 feet wide
Okay,
by 45 to 56, like.
okay,
A
that's
modular,
over 1,000 feet.
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mine's 26 by 40, and that's 1,040 square feet.
Mhm.
Like I said, I got 3 bedrooms. We had 3 of our own kids in exchange student in there about 3-4 times. So it's not uncomfortable, but at the same time, just my wife and I there now, so why do we need a 2,000 square foot home? If
Yeah.
you want a
You know.
minimum, we can go down, but if you want a larger home, you're planning on adopting 6 kids,
What a,
go for it.
what a garage, attached garage be included in that square footage?
No, this is dwelling area.
So if it's 1,000 square foot, based on what he's saying. Plus they could add a
Said
attached
1,200.
garage.
Well, we got 1,200 in
Right.
3
Okay,
areas.
so
I would
we'll
like
go
to
down
lower
to
them to
1,000.
1,000.
And that's why I'm saying I'm not comfortable with keep going smaller and smaller. We've done this once before and went smaller, so.
And what was the problem?
It's just, I look at it as encouraging too many smaller houses like that, if we
How
go.
many smaller houses did you get?
I mean, that's just, I don't
I mean, I
remember.
know what you're saying,
Right.
you were concerned about happening, but
Mhm.
what I'm saying is, did it happen?
I
Because
guess
I have a problem telling people what size their house has to be.
We're just saying minimum size, I mean, like you said, we can go bigger, but I'm just thinking if we keep going smaller and smaller on minimum sizes, that we're gonna end up getting a lot of houses around here that are that small, and maybe in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, it's just not appropriate for that neighborhood. I mean, maybe that's what we need to designate it more as for what minimum sizes per area. You know,
Well, some of these lots around here are small to start with, and so
I-
if you stick a
Exactly.
1,200 square foot home on there
Yep.
as minimum, you're gonna be pushed real tight for a well and septic system and a driveway.
I have one of the smallest lots in the Lake Erie here on average, 75 by 125, which is, I think, a typical small lot.
That's
And I had a 1,300, well,
I know
Footprint.
smaller than that. I don't know the exact size, but smaller than that.
I don't think there's too many that are smaller than that.
It
Than
says
75 by
many,
125. Pardon me?
So I would reel us in to remind you that we're talking about attached dwelling units, right?
Right.
So
Oh.
the size up there to
mhm.
do a duplex, minimum in the ordinance currently is a half acre in the LR2 area before you do that. 3/4 of an acre would be required in the medium density residential district. To do the apartment building is 2 acres or 4 acres, townhouse is 2 acres. I did that intentionally to incentivize that direction over the other in terms of what someone would want to do in the medium density residential district.
So we're not talking about an individual residential house at all
No,
at this point.
No,
okay.
you've already had that
Alright,
discussion,
Okay,
you've had that discussion 4 or 5 months ago.
okay, but that's the road I was going down, that was my mistake, so, okay.
So in that setting, the dwelling unit size would be what the unit size would be in one of those buildings in one of those districts.
Mhm.
And, you know, I would take a more cautious approach on reducing that standard, particularly in the medium density residential district. I don't. You know, 1,000 would be the lowest I would honestly think would be wise for that area, just based on, you know, the character of the housing around it. You don't want to have something that's very out of sync with the rest of the neighborhood.
Right.
But there again, that's the minimum.
Correct.
I understand
Yep.
what you're saying, that's the minimum.
Yep.
If they wanna put 2,000 square feet out there, if they've got the
Sure.
room to put it.
Yep.
You know, that's
Yep.
up to them.
You don't think it'd be holding back to be setbacks at that point, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be,
No, that area is 9 acres right now. I mean, there's ample opportunity to develop that area with attached or detached housing.
but let's say a duplex on an MDR, minimum 3/4 of an acre. Is the only thing restricting them size wise gonna be the setbacks? Obviously placement of the well, those, that kind of stuff, so really, we don't have a maximum size is what we're talking
No.
about for. So it's basically whatever you can fit on that 3/4 of an acre, including your septic and field and all of that stuff too, then, so. Okay, I guess I'm more open to changing sizes, but again, I still don't wanna go too small. Around here, understanding that,
We wanna keep it practical.
yes, exactly, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
And there's only gonna be certain areas anyway that you can put these duplexes, apartment buildings, and condos and townhouses in anyway, so that's why I need to get. Out of LR1 zone thinking is what I was starting with, so. I got them open to 1,000 if you want to, but. I think, you know, where's the 1,200 come from, just,
1,200 is the ground floor required dwelling size for a detached home in that district.
oh, okay, so you match what a
Exactly. yeah.
detached home would be, okay.
And the 900 square foot is the current ordinance standard for a duplex.
But then we just discussed that we want these attached to the current residence, right?
No, those are accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
This isn't,
This is if you're building a duplex itself right now on a half acre LR2. Right now, minimum dwelling unit is 900 square feet. And 1,200 if it's an MDR, so multi. What is an MDR, stand for again, multi. Multi. District residential, is that what we're calling
Medium density residential.
MDR? Okay. So that was replacing the LR3, so, okay. I guess I'm sort of comfortable with the numbers the way they are now, unless we hear from somebody says that I can't afford, or some other reason why reducing it would be a good idea.
But then we're at a point, they're applying for a variance. And stuff like that, so why wouldn't we make it just a permitted use?
But, well, I mean, like Tim just said, 1,200 is the minimum right now if you were gonna build a house in that same area, but now we wanna tell somebody that we're gonna allow you to do less than that.
They don't have to build it 1,000, but if they did want to, they could, that would be more than adequate, in my opinion. But if they wanna build a 1,600 square foot,
Mhm.
and they got the roof on it,
Right.
go for it.
Yeah.
So by lowering the requirements, we're saving someone financially challenged or whatever you, however you want to refer to it, the process of applying for a zoning variance. That's gonna be expensive also. That's an expense. And all this other stuff. So why not just lower it and make it easier?
So we would allow a multi-use to be smaller than what our requirement is now for a house in that same area. The house right now, correct, is 1,200 minimum for a detached, just single building, and now we're talking about allowing a multi-use.
Yeah, LR4 is 1,400 total, I believe.
To me, it comes down to where this is being located too. You know, if you're gonna do it in.
And again,
If you're-
the standards you are looking at primarily deal with what is gonna be potentially unfair.
Right.
And the LR5, theoretically, you could put in a triplex, quadplex, over that way. And the duplex is LR2, which we beat that to death quite a while ago, that is another incentive that we could use to incentivize revitalization in that neighborhood. It's a use that you can't do elsewhere. That was the same thought process with the carriage houses. These are tools that we can put before someone looking to do something in the LR2 district that has had 2 new home permits in a decade come through, 3 maybe. You know, how we utilize the code to get a positive result in that zoning district
Mhm.
is, you know, why the LR2 has a different standard than the MDR or even the LR5. Personally, I don't think you want to, I mean, if you get into definitely the triplex apartment type deal, condo, you're dealing with a developer at that point in time. You're not dealing with, you know, typically someone who's scrounging together to do a single project, with someone who more than likely in that business, in that industry, has done other projects.
These are all gonna be pretty much commercial, so.
You know, in our variance application fee is a whopping $250. The time they lose is more important than the dollar, quite frankly.
Do you know, or can you find out the current condos we have now, what the square footage of one individual condo is there? Let's say somebody wants to do the new set of condos right there, right next to that building that we have now on the railway. What are the square footages of the current condos that are there now compared to what we're talking about, 1,000 or 1,200, so. I'd be curious to know. So let's say somebody wants to duplicate what's already there now.
Yeah.
For some reason, they want to build 8 more condos, so I'm curious as to what the sizes of the current condos are, because those have been there for 30 years. Or
About
longer.
1980, 82.
Wow, 40 years.
Yeah, so I'm curious what those sizes are too. If we can figure that out. So.
I think one of them was 1,200 something.
Yeah,
I'm
but
looking at
think of that,
mine.
all right.
But I guess keep in mind that this is,
That's why we're changing this, is because we're changing with the times, Jeff.
we are
We
changing with
we
the
don't
time.
want to go back to the old method.
But this is a commercial venture at this point too, so we're not being hard on somebody who just wants to build a house. Say, I can't afford to build a very house. We're talking about somebody who's building this to make money. So do we have to be quite as polite and nice and, hey, we're gonna try to work with you for a commercial
Like,
venture kind of stuff?
like I said, this is not a required maximum. This.
No, I
is-
know, but knowing people are gonna say, I'm gonna build as cheap as I can,
Yeah,
so I can turn around and make as much money as I can. When I look at it from a commercial point of view, I don't wanna be so cooperative at that point then. You know, if you're gonna go in that business for doing that kind of stuff, I don't want cheap landlords, I don't want
absolutely.
cheap crap built in here because they can get away with 1,000 square feet versus 1,200 square feet, which is what that same neighborhood is already. Well, that's why I'm curious what these condos are right now.
I'm thinking they're about 650-ish footprint.
Yeah.
It's 2
Yeah,
stories.
the 2 stories, so.
Let's see here. I don't think any are currently available on Zillow. We'll look.
So you get where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at this from a commercial point of view now where
Well, where did that 1,200 minimum came from, in the first place?
that's like you were saying, 1,200 came from, that's what the current residential areas right around that same area are now.
So it must be
So-
something behind that.
We're saying, okay, you've got current 1,200 for a regular residential house around there, but we're gonna tell a commercial person, oh, you don't have to do 1,200, you can do 1,000. You know what I mean? It's just, I'd rather be nicer to the residential type people and make more restrictions on commercial side of things
I agree.
to do stuff. That's just my personal thought. So,
Because you know they're gonna push it to commercial.
anything that they build is gonna
Yeah.
be commercial. There's, I mean, there's nothing residential, well, I guess if someone wants to build a duplex, they're gonna live in one side of it and rent out the other side of it. Is that truly commercial? Yeah, halfway, because you're making money, you know, so somebody paying your mortgage and lives on the other side of you.
But they're not even halfway.
But anything above and beyond that is definitely commercial, you know,
Striking out here.
okay, so. And they wouldn't have that information on their tax, no, tax stuff would
There's stuff, the assessor would, but that's through the township, not the village.
Right.
I'm pretty certain they're about
100
six-
something.
625, 650 dimensions,
The
2
first floor,
story.
right.
So
Mhm.
you're 1,250, 1,300 range for the entire
Yeah.
unit.
No, I like the 1,200, I'd rather stay at that, but I guess. I've had my say, so. Plus, well, duplexes are gonna be required to have an attached garage. Correct. Versus the apartment building, the kind of houses wouldn't.
Nothing would stop them from doing that.
Oh, plus we're gonna require them to have a gable end, covered porch, attached garage. They have to pick 2 out of the 3 of those.
Dash garage doors with windows, yeah.
Yes.
Covered porch or entryway, gable end, facing the street. Pick 2.
For the driveway, not the driveway.
Yeah. Sorry.
So what are we gonna do with,
What do you think?
I think 1,200 is fine.
You have a problem with 1,000?
You know, if you allow it commercially to be built that way. I think they're gonna push and make it happen. So then you have a bunch of little. I don't know if it's that noticeable from 1,000 to 1,200, but if you don't have any standards. And there must have been a good reason for 1,200 in the first place.
Well, that's what our standard is now, like I
Yeah.
was saying earlier. so.
Yeah, whatever that came from. To me, 1,200 is not that big.
Mm-mm.
The other thing for duplex, apartment buildings, condo, townhouses type thing, are these not either retirement type livings or starter homes? Why do you need such a large one?
I don't know if they're, I guess they could be any one of those, I guess, retirement or starter, or just people who wanna have a second home up here that live in, you know, Detroit or something like that, you don't wanna have a 5,000 square foot. So they could have a condo up here, but I don't know, it comes down to appearance for me, the way things look. Like I said, I don't have a problem enforcing higher requirements than commercial.
Appearance, that, to me, I guess that's not an issue because we don't allow tar paper families. I mean, it's gotta look good. That's in our ordinance
Right.
already. It's gotta look good.
Yep, I thought my piece, I'd like to say 1,200, so I can be outvoted, obviously, so no problem, so.
You got my 2 cents.
Yep.
So. Is that enough for a vote?
You don't have to make this decision tonight either,
No.
because we can. Or is it easier for you to have more of a decision tonight versus waiting until Amy and or a new
For
planning commission
the
comes
better
in?
part of a year, we've had the goal of getting it out.
Yeah.
done.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. We don't wanna hold it too
Specifically
Quickly turning into like a garage.
Yeah.
issue, I'd like to get it off the table.
Right. All right. I'd like to say 1,200, that's my final say, so.
I tend to agree right now unless we have other evidence or whatever.
So
My,
you're going-
my garage is 1,200. I don't see how you can build. I have 2 cars and a motorcycle and a couple of different things in there. That's
So
it.
you're going with 1,200.
Yeah.
Well, in the interest of getting this thing moving, I'll back off and go with 1,200. Because it's gonna be 2 to 2 if we don't. I don't wanna drag this on another month. Or 2.
The council still's gotta go through it all too.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother public hearing they gotta deal with.
And obviously, maybe they'll be, to Tom's credit, maybe it's in
Yeah.
a council meeting, you can bring it up and say, hey, there was.
Yeah.
Question of 1,000 and maybe get some council members' opinions as well too. so. See what they say.
And a written comment from you and Nerdy.
Well, yes,
I wanna be able to let the council know that we're basically split on this.
Yeah.
Well, that's all right, but I guess. My feeling on this is a board decision, so I have to support that no matter what. It's not my belief, but as a board decision, I'll have to back it.
No, I can tell the council that,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
split against it, that you're against it, and I'm.
Yeah.
if you
I'm
want
perfectly fine with that.
I want
That's
1,000.
totally fine.
Then it's gonna be up to the council to decide.
Right.
Okay,
All you people are doing right now is deciding what goes to the council for
Mhm.
approval,
Right,
Right.
exactly.
For consideration.
Yeah.
considering.
Yeah.
With an eye towards approval.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, what were some of the other things you wanted to deal with tonight?
You go.
The overhang and lean-to issue.
Yeah.
The only part of our code that it talks about is with respect to detached garages and they're put in to prohibit future instances of the illustration on the right. If you're gonna do an overhang, lean-to, we want it to look like part of the building.
And since that one was built, have square footages have changed,
Not significant.
not significantly, so, okay.
I think we went from like 1,280 to 1,300.
Right.
But,
In this particular case, the only reason he did that is he wanted more storage.
you want more space.
Right, and I don't blame
Yep.
him. I see that side of the story now easier, that I've seen it completed. Gabled out or cantilevered 8-foot hangover both sides of that, I don't like the looks of it, so. I understand why he did it. But I don't know, taking away that capability and not making some kind of changes to square footage, is that fair? In the sense that I'm trying to go back to my joint.
You've already made a significant change if you go with a different definition of footprint, which is what you came out last month with.
With Palmier stuff, right?
Because the current definition of a footprint would take that outside post on the left example and measure from there. Your definition that you wanted in from the exterior walls doesn't count the lean-to against the building size.
Right.
So if you say 1,300, they could do 1,300 enclosed,
Mhm.
have lean-tos on the side that is outside and not counted against the 1,300 is the implication of that change.
Right. And in Palmier's case, he's talking about on the house versus this particular instance, we're talking here, detached garage, but
I'll have to go look at it. I haven't seen this one.
so if somebody wants to try to go overboard it now, the 1,330 square feet restriction on the detached garage, correct, size wise?
1,300.
And then how, and they'd say, well, I want more room, like this particular person did. How far can you put a cantilever overhang out realistically or structure wise?
At least 8 feet.
Well, we know that, but I'm just wondering if there's any, that you could do further than that.
Potentially, I wouldn't probably think much more, maybe 8, 10.
I'm approaching this strictly from aesthetics. I'm not opposed to having somebody put a camper under there. Yes, I would prefer to have it in the garage, but he's already said, hey, you are restricting me to 1,300 square feet. But I got more stuff I want to store, so I want to do these cantilevered overhangs. I'd almost rather see a post on the end to make it look better.
I
And
think
I'm approaching it strictly from that point of view.
originally he wanted more than this 8
Oh,
feet,
yeah.
but the
Oh,
engineering,
yeah.
pushed him back.
I think he was going 12 out on each side was the original drawing.
Yeah, and then he had to go back 8 for engineering.
24 total. Well, my mind is,
So I'm saying 8 feet's probably about as far as you dare go.
um. What I would put out there for you to think about is, I think the limitation of a 2-foot overhang is appropriate. Because you also have to remember the ordinance, when you went through the garage stuff, you allowed the height to go up to 28 feet. So I think the overhang is a critical part of not letting that balloon out sideways. Because if you go taller, you should be able to put a larger overhang potentially. That wouldn't really matter, I guess.
That doesn't- You're gonna get an overhang where you could run the water off on the neighbor's property eventually. If you let it go.
Yeah, I would say we avoid that. Because
Yeah.
the change I made to setback would say that while the lean-to doesn't count against your square footage, it still counts against your setback. That's still where
That's only makes.
we're gonna say you can't come closer,
Mhm.
whether you can close it or not, whatever.
And like this guy, I think if he's got the room to
Yeah.
do it and he wants a bigger building, there again, a variance or that's something we already addressed in the ordinance is expanding the size of that. I think that's the way to go.
I agree with that, yeah. If they have the
So-
space.
Anybody who were to do something like this, still gonna have a minimum 8-foot setback from their neighbors.
Not for a detached garage, it's, on the side, you mean? Yes.
Okay, cause I'm just
Total of
thinking,
20, no less than 8 on a single side. Rear yard 20 feet.
I'm thinking more of the idea, if we get torrential rain coming down and he has
Yeah,
that kind of water runoff, is he gonna flood his neighbor's yard? And that's where maybe we need to be a little bit more concerned about the proper drainage for water and stuff like that, that if you are gonna do something like that, can we have a requirement if you're gonna be within so many feet of well, even that doesn't count, because if they're on a higher elevation than their neighbors, water's gonna run away, so. And for this, we're only talking about detached garages.
correct. Yeah, it's the only where that it comes into play in the ordinance. Good to. Accessory dwelling units. I honestly, for the sake of brevity, I say just take it out completely at this point in time. I mean, unless you want to go the attached, right? I definitely don't think you leave the detached option available. If you're gonna allow it, you allow it as an attached, or you take it out completely.
And we check the one, just the 2-foot overhang.
No, we're talking accessory dwelling units now.
Okay, all right.
So right now, the draft will allow the box in the LR5 district, which there's like a dozen of those properties in the village proposed. You address the concerns last month of what happens when grandma moves out or whoever. Thought I had was you make it attached instead of detached, that way it's easier to make it part of the primary structure, to convert back into a single living space.
Agree.
The very scenario you describe, I know quite a few of those places like that, and it becomes a rental unit.
Yeah,
And so by it being attached, I think we would eliminate that.
Probably keep it more family
Yeah.
oriented than that,
Yep.
just some family in Joe Blow
Yeah.
living in the side by side. Yeah, I like
Even if
that
they're
idea.
renting, it's gonna be family.
and that's what the proposed definition says. It has to be an immediate family member
Yeah.
residing in the dwelling unit.
I'm fine with making that switch then, so.
And that would also take any of the design stuff out of the accessory structure part, but it's not gonna be an accessory structure at this point in time, so that part will come out.
That would mean the driveway and parking and all that stuff too would still be only to the residents of.
Yeah.
That house.
And then back on the medium density residential, golf course and go to special land use provision. I would make honestly all those special land uses just based on the sensitivity of what's around that area.
Yeah,
Um,
makes sense.
can't do it for the foster care home. But anything else I would think is special, that's something you're gonna wanna have input in terms of neighbors, public hearing, just to make sure that it is conducive to the neighborhood setting.
Yeah, there'd be some areas around here that'd be fine, the
Yeah.
other areas we obviously heard.
Yeah.
But absolutely not, no circumstances whatsoever do they want it, and I don't blame them.
Perfect.
And I would also, the other change, the only other area where apartment is allowed in the ordinance would be as a second floor use in the Coldwater Business District. I would say make that meet the LR5 standard,
800, 1200,
yeah,
Okay.
LR5.
oh, the 800s, okay.
Those, I believe, are all the changes I have. Try to highlight every one in the draft itself for you, and then what we obviously had tonight on the table. I think it would be appropriate to take public comment on it before the planning commission takes any action.
Yep.
To get more feedback, if there's things that we do want to
Absolutely.
tweak further.
Any public comment?
Oh. I just want to make sure I understand the 1,000 and the 1,200. The 1,000 you're discussing was for attached dwelling only.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not gonna have a bunch of tiny houses.
That's what I was going down first
That's
too.
what I was
Yep.
thinking.
So let me bring it up right here. So,
I had a question about the detached single family dwelling. I'm not sure I understand what that means.
the house.
Just the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a dwelling is either attached or detached. So if it's attached, it's got another one to it. If it's detached, it's a house by itself.
Okay. And it looks like with some of the changes that you're proposing, that LR1 is same as LR4 now. Yeah.
Most of LR4, actually all of LR4 is currently zoned LR1.
So what's the purpose of changing it? I mean,
So when we went through the garage inquisition in 2020. One of the things that we got a lot of feedback on was from property owners who had purchased property from the late Frank Cooley.
uh-huh,
And in those areas of the village, the building and use restrictions required more demanding design and size requirements than the Lake Isabella Corporation plats that were done in the sixties and early seventies. And as we looked at what was platted with Bonita Bay, Foresta Verde, Patinas Point, you know, it really stuck out to us that those are areas that have a different standard. They're intended to have a different standard, and to try and make the 75 by 150 rectangle that the corporation platted in the sixties meet there was really not what was intended for that area. So we bumped all of those up to go back and hopefully meet what those development restrictions were supposed to be from day one. Because when we incorporated 98, you know, we had LR1 and LR2, and that was what you got. And I think since then, we've had the ability to really sit back and look and say, you know, these are areas that are unique in our community, and they should be, you know, given zoning to reflect that. So there is a more higher design standard in terms of LR1 to LR4. So there's more requirements on the combination of material type, color variation, mix of materials. You gotta do 2 of the gable end or covered porch or dormer as opposed to just 1. So those are all things that we put in to try and make sure that development there is consistent with the existing property values of the homes that have already been developed in the LR4, proposed LR4 area.
I think I understand.
Okay.
If there's already certain houses in an area, we want to make sure that we try to continue to let people match that,
Well,
not come in
obviously,
with something half the size or, you know, not anywhere near as
Yeah.
many requirements.
I guess that's why I don't see why there's any reason to change the LR1 to LR4, other than,
So I will use my home at 1070 Bunyan as an example. It doesn't right now because it doesn't have an attached garage. We have a 2.5 detached. But it's a 28 by 56 ranch style home. It's a rectangle that if it had a garage attached to it would meet the zoning requirements. And I think that's the concern that we have on our end is, would a development like that jive next to, you know, one of the waterfront homes on El Camino or Patinas Point or down at the end of Bundy and Queensway? You know, you want development that is reflective of the existing values and architecture of that area. And I think these changes are what we're doing to make that
okay,
far more likely than putting in a rectangle like I live in.
are there any, is there anything on the horizon for condominiums or apartments?
No, the only property currently zoned for that is the condo area over here. All the available land is owned by one individual. And he made an inquiry earlier this year, you know, what can I do there? Can I divide it into single family lots? And you know, he said, you know, based on the land division, you can make 4 or more building sites there if you're going single family. We have not heard back from him, and talked with one of his neighbors today who said he's really not that interested in doing anything over there. So
There was, rumors at one time about the corner of Coldwater and El Camino, that land in there.
no, you know, that area, if you were to actually go out and walk it, there's not a ton of great buildable space. There's some off the El Camino side, but after that,
Go down to the river.
you know, you've got to walk out. It's quite a walk now,
I have a walkout now.
you know.
That's where the old river used to run.
Yeah.
It's down at the bottom of the hill in that property.
Yeah, that is
The river used to run right through there before it was dammed up
Yeah.
and made a lake, so you can see all the cattails and stuff like that still in there.
Yeah,
Exactly
we
where
lived
the
just
river used
down
to
the
run.
road from there. I was kind of
Yeah.
wondering, because we had heard that they were possibly talking about
No, right about
condominiums. and-
here is the kind of line of demarcation of,
Yeah,
you could do, you know, 5, maybe 6, you know, but Bonita Bay size lots off of El Camino up here. You know, but the rest of this is, you know, here's the original river channel,
Yeah.
here. And most of this is wetland, so I mean, you're really boxed in up here is what you can do.
So does an individual own that now?
Yeah, it got sold 2020,
Yeah, 2 years ago.
right,
years
right at the
ago.
start of the pandemic, bought both parcels. Mark Cashin and Chad Payton are the owners.
I agree with what Mr. Corser was saying that, some of us that've been here quite a few years that would like to stay in this area,
Sure.
but you don't need those huge houses anymore. Some condominiums or apartments or
I agree, yeah.
something like on that order would be nice.
I've had multiple neighbors say the same thing. They don't wanna leave here, but they don't wanna live in their
Yeah, I
5,000
mean,
square
it's
foot
just-
house either.
After a while, you don't want that big house anymore.
Right,
You can't take
exactly.
care of that big house.
I'm getting
You
there.
don't wanna leave, so.
Mhm.
In a far more of a factor than our zoning that limits density is the lack of water and sewer.
Yeah,
You know, and the village has no plans to do either. It's not even discussed, it's not in our master plan, it's nowhere on our horizon to do
We don't
either.
have to win that $1 trillion lotto or whatever before they'll do all that.
You know, quite candidly, even then, I don't know if it would still be appropriate, because I think something like that would fundamentally change the character of our community.
Sure.
And I don't think that that is a move in the right direction.
Mhm.
Certainly if it's a health issue, but just to do it for the sake of doing it to grow, I think that's the wrong idea. I think that's the wrong approach.
Maybe for the business area, but that's.
there
another-
really isn't room on Coldwater Road either between the road and the golf course. There's not.
No,
much space.
You don't know-
When started even for the business area, Jeff, it's gonna grow from there, so.
Yeah.
It's best not to start.
Yes and no. I mean, I could see the business area being restricted to where it is now. If they had water and sewer, would that bring in more businesses? Or different kind of business, maybe fast food restaurant or, you know, something like that. I don't know. That has more dependency
You don't
on
have
that, but
that much traffic or.
so.
yeah, but is that the appropriate thing for the community? to say?
Exactly. Do we want to still be a sleepy, you know, retirement type
Community.
community, or do we want to grow into a bigger business? And I would assume we want to stay what we are now, so at least most people would feel like that.
I mean, we're certainly not opposed if a business wants to locate in any of the existing parcels, but
Right.
to grow for the sake of growth is not the mentality I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Yep. Sorry, it was your floor, so.
No, I'm finished, I think. Thank you.
I'd like to get some clarification on, I guess, what I would be able to do down the road regarding small homes and additional B and Bs on our Little Flower Barn property. This year, we've got 60 weddings roughly, bringing in 10,000 people to the village. Probably, I would guess 70 to 80% of those people have never been here before, so they're seeing it for the first time. Our existing parcel is a little over 4 acres. We're Coldwater Business District. We have the event barn, have the original barn my great grandpa built that we're doing lodging for 17 in. That's the only lodging on the property right now. As it stands, the new ordinance would classify my parents' property, which has 1 acre of their 2-story home, which they no longer reside in. They're both in assisted living and will probably stay there. I'm talking with them about possibly purchasing the house under what I've seen in LR5. B and Bs are permitted as a special, under a special use. My main question, I guess, would be, we also have the original farmhouse on the property, which the original portion of it is small. It's maybe a 20 by 30 footprint. The inside of the house is falling down. It's at some point gonna need to be either completely demolished or the southern half taken off and renovated into a potential lodging if we're allowed to do that. But I guess my main question would be, am I allowed on that 4 acre currently zoned Coldwater business property, would I be allowed to do not only the renovation of that farmhouse, but also the addition of a couple of tiny homes, let's say, that meet the square footage guideline, whether it's 800 square feet total or 1,000 square feet total? next to that house. Is that something that would be permitted under the current zoning ordinance, or the proposed zoning ordinance?
Let's see, let's look.
Those units, you know, both my parents' larger house and say 3 smaller homes near where grandma's home is, those would all be offered at first as an option to wedding clients for, you know, a lot of the parents don't like to stay in the barn because typically some of the bridal parties in the barn and they're whooping it up inside, you know, and later into the hours, the adults, you know, their parents, the aunts and uncles would probably fill up mom and dad's house, as well as some smaller homes, but those smaller homes, my parents' house would, if weddings did not take those, we would offer those to the general public.
You looking up some info?
I am.
Okay.
The house is currently under the special land use. Is allowed the overnight lodging as a hotel motel use in the ordinance. Bed and breakfast would be allowed in the LR5, but it does require the occupant to live there as well. I think doing independent, smaller home type things. There's attached or detached rental units. Contain a bedroom. You know, under the hotel motel, it says a structure where a series of attached, semi-attached, or detached rental units containing a bedroom, bathroom, and closet space wherein each unit has a separate individual entrance where persons acquire temporary lodging on a transit basis. I don't think anything would preclude, other than it talks about multiple units in a structure, so the smallest would necessarily be like a 2-unit, you know, suites A and B, C and D type deal. That would meet the definition of hotel motel, which is where he's at with LR Coldwater Business. So I don't think that would preclude it in any fashion. Hotel motel site development standards. Past the G's. Any exterior play area or swimming pool shall be fenced. Each unit shall contain at least a bedroom and a bathroom. Each unit contain at least 250 square feet. I think that's, yeah, not too demanding. If you really wanted to be brutally honest. Yeah, I think under that, it's a special land use permit at that point in time, so.
Okay, so would that typically result in me just needing to get the neighbor's approval?
Yeah.
At like a public hearing?
Yeah, so special land use process. Same thing we did the first time when you came in for the tent, that process.
And, but yeah, and that, from that point of view, we were getting along pretty good with the neighbors, even around across the street. We've had one noise complaint in 100 events or so. We're monitoring literally every event with music. I'm monitoring the decibel level probably half a dozen times a night, and about every other wedding, telling them to turn the bass down. And that's part of our success as far as not having a lot of noise complaints. I get comments about people hearing it, but you know, and is it bothering you? And they say, no, you know, we just hear it, you know, but music is off at 11 like we're supposed to be. People are gone from the property typically by 11:30, 11:45. But the market's there for the lodging, and I think as of now, we've shown that we can keep the people under control for the most part.
What is your address again? I'm sorry.
1100.
That's right. 1100. Queensway? You say Queensway?
Right.
Queensway?
Mhm.
Okay,
El Camino.
that's what I thought. You said Queensway. confused for a second there. So you're right here. Here. Oh, wrong way. Let's see. Right here. Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed here in this community is that the lake does, you know, 3,300 feet. I've heard it at my house. I don't live.
It's not annoyingly.
No.
I mean, when it goes off, like, you know, you aren't going
Yeah,
right into the night. That's just across the water.
I realized that factor when I heard Jedi Mind Trip, which is my fourth weekend. Yeah, something like they were next door.
It's amazing that you hear people talking about out on the water. You
Yeah.
don't realize
Oh, it
that.
is.
You don't hear everyone say.
My conversation travels for half a minute.
oh, yeah.
All done.
Other comments?
I have an observation on the medium density residential area, about the 1,000 or 1,200. I don't know how many units you could get on that parcel, but for every 5 that you build, there could be an extra one if they were only 1,000. And so you'd be picking up even more density than what you would at 1,000 or at 1,200. So that, just an
Yeah.
observation. But, so there'd be more units in there at that smaller square footage.
I don't think that's a bad idea because with it having to be well and septic, there's gonna be a pretty sizable drain field that has to go in if anybody wants to do something like this. So that,
I think the septic system is gonna regulate how many units you can have in that area.
yeah,
There you go, yeah.
It's usually per bedroom, don't they? Central Michigan Health Department, look at a bit per bedroom, determining the size of that stuff too, so.
Yeah.
So if we had 5 units, 2 bedrooms, gonna make a
Yeah.
bigger required septic field and.
It might not even meet the requirements for PERC.
Sure.
So you might have to cut it back to 3.
Based on what they're gonna let you do.
Yeah.
Thanks, good observation.
perhaps making that an option for the condo townhouse, because I
Yeah.
think between that or apartment, I think we're trying to push people towards the condo, because it's more appropriate what's already there. You know, 1,200. We could just include a footnote, if you're proposing to build 6 units, the size drops to 1,000. 6 or more units drops to 1,000.
How does this with that? Now,
So that incentivizes that.
but it also makes the health department now say you have to have a bigger
Sure.
septic field and bigger tank.
But that's why you're
Based on
cutting,
budget.
you're cutting that from 12 to 1,000. Because it doesn't say it has to be ground floor, it could be condo like it currently is, you know, 600, 600.
That's about a 2 acre. Yep, 2 acre
Yeah.
lot. Minimum,
Minimum,
right?
minimum.
Then again, I guess adding more bedrooms makes a bigger requirement for septic, so to me, that means the building's gonna be smaller.
Which means you're gonna have fewer buildings,
You're gonna have to what?
which means you're gonna have fewer buildings.
Okay,
I think it would be more appropriate to have 1 or 2 buildings that are landscaped and, you know, 6 smaller buildings. I think that's, you know, more in line with the size of the current condo and,
so the current condo right now, they have their own, is it one septic field and tank for
I
all
believe
8
so.
condos?
I
Okay,
believe so.
okay. So that would probably be the same thing with any new building put in there, so. I guess I could see some leeway on that for the condo side of things, so. Anybody else?
Quick question, what would the potential soonest date that this ordinance would be,
I'm sorry, can you read?
what would be the soonest potential date the ordinance would be adopted by the council?
gonna be,
If, if not to put pressure on you four gentlemen tonight. You make a recommendation to the council still obviously gets to, you know. Review it,
and they have to have. a public
once the
hearing.
council formally introduces it for a public hearing,
Right,
you're locked in, you can't get any changes without having to go back to start here. If you were to recommend it tonight, the September village council meeting is the 20th. At that time, they would receive it, discuss it. They could move it forward for a public hearing at the October 18th meeting. I'm not sure if they're gonna wanna have a month to review it before they do that. If I was a gambling man, I would say November, which is the Deer Day meeting, so I know it's getting changed because it's November 15th. You can't meet virtually anymore, so you can't zoom in from your deer blind.
and by that point too, a lot of people are out of town.
Yeah, so I'm thinking,
So,
realistically, October, November.
with no.
You know, they've been in the loop the whole time we've been doing this, so
Right.
it shouldn't be
Mhm.
terribly shocking
Yeah.
to them. And we've got a very qualified representative on the board here tonight.
Yes, we do.
Advocate on your behalf.
Maybe.
That's the realistic timeline.
Any other comment?
So, make a motion that we adjourn? No, that's true, we don't recommend, I'm going back to Sherman Township stuff, we only make our motion to adjourn at that point.
You don't have any new business, any public comment, so I guess, are you?
Make a motion that we forward this on to the council for approval.
Yeah. So, did you? or-
I made the motion.
You made a motion, so are you gonna take a motion? Okay,
With the changes discussed tonight.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Ladies, folks. Thank you.
Any other additional public comment? Appreciate you guys coming in. I really do appreciate your feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.